Welcome to People, Power, and Politics. Hard talk, riveting interviews, community updates, in-depth analysis. That's People, Power, and Politics. We tell it to you as it is. No holds barred. You are the people. You have the power. We bring you the politics. To listen to our podcast, be a guest, or to advertise, visit www.pppradio.nyc. That's www.pppradio.nyc.
A very warm welcome to everyone. We are joined by a very special guest, Dr. Sofya Aptekar, who is an Associate Professor of Urban Studies at the City University of New York School of Labor and Urban Studies. She is the author of Green Card Soldier, Between Model Immigrants and Security Threats, and The Road to Citizenship, What Naturalization Means for Immigrants and the United States. Dr. Aptekar researches and writes about the immigration system, urban diversity, and workforce inequalities. She is a proud union member and worker organizer. Such a pleasure and an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So tell us, what inspired you to write the book?
Thanks for that question. My first book, The Road to Citizenship, was all about how immigrants get U.S. citizenship, the naturalization process, and through that research, I learned that there is a faster route to citizenship for members of the military, and it kind of stayed in my mind, and I wanted to pursue it more. And then I was talking to a colleague of mine who had traveled for a conference to northern Mexico, and he told me about this experience of being in this conference, and a group of veterans stood up in the room, and they unfurled a banner, and it said, deported veterans. Once I learned about, veterans who get deported, I really wanted to pursue it more, and ended up writing my whole second book about immigrants in the military.
Okay, The Green Card Soldier. I love the title of this. So your book is full of stories of immigrants who served in the U.S. military. How did you gather those stories?
Yeah, it took kind of a long time. It took about 5 years. And I ended up talking to 72 immigrants who enlisted as non-citizens all over the United States, and some deported ones as well in mostly northern Mexico. And it was really hard to find people to talk to. So I did a lot of, cold calling, veteran services of various kinds, veteran offices and community colleges. And people would tell me, like, what are you talking about? You can't be in the military if you're not a U.S. citizen. So people didn't even know that was a thing. So it took kind of a long time to get to that many interviews, but that's where the information comes from.
Okay. And what kinds of factors influence immigrants' decisions to enlist in the military?
So from talking to the 70-plus folks, I really saw that there was a difference between immigrants who mostly grew up in the United States, who came as little kids, and those who came as young adults. So for the ones that came as younger children and grew up in the U.S., the reasons for enlisting are similar to people who are not immigrants. A lot are pushed into it by economic factors, needing to pay off a debt with a recruitment bonus, or being worried about how am I going to pay for college, or ideas about what's a proper way of being a man, and going into the military is going to make me a real man. But for those who came at older ages, citizenship was a factor. So they were aware that by enlisting, they would have a faster way of getting citizenship. And it mattered more to them, to the ones who grew up in the U.S. For example, I remember one interview with a young woman who was in her green card was through her husband, who was a U.S. citizen. But the marriage was rocky. He had substance abuse disorder, and she was worried. He's going to get in trouble with the law, and I'm going to lose my green card. So it pushed her to join the Army and get her citizenship that way.
She could have just got a consultation from us, the lawyer. But you mentioned that many people didn't know about the path to citizenship in the U.S. military, and there's this expedited path. So how does that process work?
Yeah, that's important to know because it's also like one of the ways the military advertises itself to immigrants, that this is what you're having. You'll have that if you enlist. And so there are two legal provisions. First thing to know is that the process is pretty much the same as it is for civilians in terms of, demonstrating English proficiency, the citizenship exam, the interview, good moral character. What's different is the waiting period. So if you're normally waiting 5 years or 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen, under peacetime provisions of the Immigration and Naturalization Act, you are eligible after 1 year. So that's a much shorter period. Under wartime provisions, which are current now because we have been at war since 2001, it is immediate. So in some years, a lot of immigrants naturalized after completing basic training. So that's much quicker than it is. So that's kind of the legal part of it. The reality is a lot more complicated because when you are working in the military, it's actually kind of hard to go through the immigration processes. For example, you move a lot, right? So your address changes. It's hard to get time off if you're on base somewhere and drive a long time to go to the immigration office for this appointment or that appointment. And if there are not, special programs to facilitate that, for a lot of people, they ended up waiting until they were out of the military and just went through the civilian process because it was just too much to deal with. And that matters because, well, one, they're vulnerable to deportation, and that's how veterans get deported. So that's super important. But if they're interested in advancing their military careers, a lot of the paths to advancements are closed to them because many of the occupations require security clearances, and you can't get that if you're not a U.S. citizen. So they would be stuck in kind of the lower levels of the military where you're exposed to more risk of harm. So there are a lot of reasons they might want to become a U.S. citizens, but barriers as well.
I'm thinking this is probably a deliberate process by the whole, part of the system, a deliberate process to keep them at that level and have them be the frontline soldiers. So what is the MAVNI program, and how can immigrants who don't have a green card enlist?
Right. And, I work at CUNY, and sometimes even my immigrant students ask me about that. Like, well, I heard you don't have to have a green card to get into the military. And it's true that until 2017, there was this special program called MAVNI. It stands for Military Accessions of Vital National Interest, kind of a mouthful. And through that program, they enlisted people who are technically non-immigrants. They're on visas. Mostly these were student visas, some employment visas, some asylum seekers, even a couple of hundred DACA recipients enlisted through this special program. And they got citizenship, like from having a visa, they went to having citizenship very quickly, which is normally, as you know, is decades of waiting, right? Even if you get there. And the point of that program was to get people with these skills that are of vital national importance, and that skill was almost for all of them language. So there's a list of 50-some languages that were of vital national importance. The United States military is all over the world and needs these folks to speak these languages to be in these places. So people were able to enlist without a green card through that program. But in 2017, it ended because there were a lot of concerns about security threats. So this is always the case with immigrants in the military. We need their special skills. They speak the languages. They know the culture. But are they spies, right? There's always that suspicion that makes it also very difficult to be an immigrant in the military.
Well, that goes back to the name of your book, Green Card Soldier, Between Model Immigrants and Security Threats.
Exactly.
So, you have lots of stories about immigrants and their experiences in the military. Was there a common thread?
Yeah, there are some common threads, but I'll start by saying that, race and gender and whether you seem like a recent immigrant really affects your experience in the military. So even though the military markets itself as a colorblind institution, it's egalitarian, and the hierarchies in the military are very much shaped by race and gender. If you look at military justice, for example, people who end up, bearing the brunt of military justice system are people of color. And, we all have heard terrible, terrible stories of violence against women in the military. So, of course, there is a huge difference between, a recent woman immigrating from Pakistan versus a European white man immigrant who grew up in the U.S. But one thing that's kind of, I didn't necessarily start out looking for this or asking about it directly, but when people explained to me what it was like to be in the military, it just kind of arose over and over and over across all kinds of immigrants, is just the harm that they sustained as military workers to their bodies, to their minds, like really lasting serious harm and injury that they ended up bringing that out because it was difficult to understand their lives if you didn't know about that. So even I didn't directly ask them how, the military affected your health. They ended up bringing up all the injuries. It's a very, and the way that these injuries were normalized. It was just like, that's just how it is. And also the way that a lot of them held back from seeking proper care because they were worried how they were seen as immigrants. Are they only in the military to get citizenship? There's kind of always a kind of people looking at them funny. And that pushed some of them past kind of the breaking point with their bodies. And I would say that's kind of a thread that runs through all kinds of immigrants.
So one of the most shameful and sad things, I believe, is the fact that hundreds of veterans are being deported. Why do you think that happens?
We live at a time of just extreme criminalization of immigrants in the United States. And the fact that there are deported veterans is just, a piece of that larger story. If, once the category of aggravated felony was created as an immigration, type of crime category, that is, really broad and all kinds of crimes are in it, from murder to forging a check. A lot of immigrants get caught up in that system, get detained and then deported. There are not special provisions for veterans. And veterans, when they separate from the military, they face a lot of challenges. They might struggle with substance abuse disorders. They might be unhoused. So it is not, for a lot of them, it's not unlikely they will come into contact with the criminal justice system.
Okay, so what do you hope readers will take away from your book?
I think the points I'm trying to make with my book is that we should really question the story that's too often told, I think, that of the military as a way for immigrants to advance in U.S. society. We should question the promises that the military makes to young people and their families, and think more about the cost to the workers in the military, but also the costs to the people across the world who bearing the brunt of U.S. military involvement in their communities and are displaced by the U.S. military, and that become immigrants that come to the United States and are pushed to enlist.
And how can one, get their hands on a copy of your book?
Thanks. It's available everywhere books are sold. So you can get it on bookshop.com if you like to support independent bookstores. And it's published by MIT Press, and you can available on their website as well.
Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Aptekar. It was a pleasure having you here, and we hope to have you back here again to talk some more immigration with us.
Great. Thanks so much.
Our pleasure.
Welcome to People, Power, and Politics. Hard talk, riveting interviews, community updates, in-depth analysis. That's People, Power, and Politics. We tell it to you as it is. No holds barred. You are the people. You have the power. We bring you the politics. To listen to our podcast, be a guest, or to advertise, visit www.pppradio.nyc. That's www.pppradio.nyc.